All right, we've got the Ascent coming out on July 29th, and this looks really cool. This kind of game might be right up my alley. It's got the cyberpunk theme. We see it's got co-op available, but you can also do it single player. That looks very strategic, like a twin stick shooter, but also seems to have some Diablo vibes. And for this type of zoomed out kind of top-down gameplay, the graphics actually look excellent, but at what cost? I actually hadn't been following this game. This, by the way, I'll link in the description. This is the official gameplay trailer that I found here on YouTube. But let's hop over to the system requirements page. I've got a lot to say about this, and this is actually where I found out about the game. Somebody in the comment section to one of my other system requirements videos was like, hey, did you see the Ascent? It requires an RTX 2080 for 1080p? What? Let me move out of your way here a bit, guys. Look. Green screens are confusing. RTX 2080. And actually, almost more confusingly, Radeon RX 6800 XT required for 1080p. Now, can I just say that there's a lot about the system requirements page that I absolutely love? Can more developers do this? Additional notes. They tell us what they're targeting for their requirements, okay? Let's also say that the minimums here are actually very, very reasonable. Awesome. Okay, let's take a look. So first of all, yeah, these look pretty beefy. Not only the GPUs here, but also the processors. By the way, don't click away. If you're just like, oh, there's the requirements, I'm not gonna just do this. I'm also gonna take you to like help you decide if your GPU isn't one of these ones listed. I'll help you decide where does yours fall in comparison to that, okay? We'll get there, just a second. Anyway, so recommended requirements are an i9 9900K, which is above what I have. I have an i5 9600K. And then we also see the AMD Ryzen 7 3700X. Notice that these are, there's a lot of cores here, right? So it looks like this game is probably designed around having a lot of cores available, which would be why we'd see that this high. But if you look down at the minimum requirements, the game can go all the way down to an i5 3470 or an AMD FX 8350. And I believe that these are, is that trying to say that that's like 4 cores? I think that might be what that's saying. These are 8 cores. So it looks like you can run the game on 4 cores, but it's probably built around and optimized for 8 cores. We got 16 gigabytes of RAM recommended, but 8 gigabytes will be playable at the minimum requirements. Now, the graphics settings here are, and this is the first time I've ever seen an RTX 2080 or a Radeon, this is even crazier, Radeon RX 6800 XT recommended for just 1080p. Close to, notice, close to 60 FPS on average. That doesn't even mean that you're gonna be guaranteed to get 60 FPS. And this is for overall high settings. And it's unclear here if high is completely maxed out, or if there's an ultra setting above this that is even more demanding. So anyway, this thing looks pretty tough to run on the high settings, but the game did look really nice. But here's what I like to see. When a game has really demanding high-end requirements, I'm actually totally fine with that, unless it's just plain old bad optimization. As long as the game is still playable to a wide range of systems that are much lower than that. And that's what I love to see here on the minimum system requirements, where I've already talked about the processor and RAM. The graphics card here is just a GTX 660 or a Radeon R9 3090X. Sorry, not 3090, geez. 390X. You need a 3090 as your minimum. Anyway, again, additional notes here. Please, more developers do this. We have the minimum specification listed above allows gameplay experience close to 30 frames per second on average while using 1080p resolution and the lowest setting. So if you're curious, what is the minimum targeting? It's 1080p, lowest graphics settings, 30 frames per second, average, roughly. Now, here's why I don't think that's a disaster to target 30 frames per second. In a first-person shooter, I think 30 frames per second is a disaster. In a game like what we were just watching here, this type of thing, look, that's gonna be okay at 30 frames per second. I'm not gonna say it's ideal. I would rather be at 60 or above, obviously. But this kind of more fixed camera angle, slower pace sort of thing like this, I think actually would be completely playable at 30 frames per second if that's what you've got to do. Okay, now you probably don't actually have these exact graphics cards. So how do you decide where yours falls? Well, this is where it can be very helpful to go to somewhere like Tech Power Up, and link will be in the description, where you can look up in their GPU database the relative performance of various GPUs. I can probably make myself, I can fly. Magics of green screen. I'm getting smaller. Anyway, so here's what we got. So if you look at the minimum requirement here, the GTX 660, we can now zoom in on its relative performance, right? I zoomed in too far here. Relative performance here compared to other cards. Now I'm not gonna like highlight everything out here, but one thing I wanna show you is the huge difference between the minimum and the recommended. The GTX 660, if we're setting that at 100%, if we go all the way up to the 2080, which is what was recommended, where are we at here? 2080. That is 467% the performance. So this is a really nice to see gap in terms of like, they're supporting a wide range of cards in between the minimum and the recommended. And sorry, that's the 2070 Super. We're actually up at 497%. Yeah, so we're actually literally like 5 times the performance. There we go, guys. Sorry for that little slip there. I'm sure you caught it before I did. Okay, so we've got that. Now, where do you fall in between here? So compared to the minimums, again, if you're just slightly below this, and again, they said the AMD equivalent that they were targeting was that R9 390. So keep that in mind, that looks a bit beefier here. And that's another interesting thing that I saw here, because let's also look at the recommended requirements. So the recommended being the RTX 2080. This is really interesting to me, and might mean that this game is optimized more for NVIDIA cards, because the AMD recommendation, I mean, I almost feel like I'm making a mistake here. Let me go back to the page. It's a 6800 XT. That's not supposed to be an equivalent to an RTX 2080, which tells me that this game is going to heavily favor NVIDIA architecture, unless it's just the systems requirements page being like sponsored by NVIDIA or something. That's mostly a joke. Okay, anyway, but the 6800 XT is theoretically a 61% lead in performance on average compared to a 2080. But again, remember that different games favor and engines favor different architectures. So that's probably what's going on here. Although, you know, that's a bit rough there for AMD users here. We saw that on the low end recommendations as well. So anyway, how far below the 2080 do you fall? Find your GPU on the list. For example, I have an RTX 2070, so I'm at 85% of that performance. So I would definitely imagine that I'm gonna be turning down to medium at least to be 60 frames per second 1080p. And honestly, I play at 1440p ultra wide, so I'm probably gonna be having to turn quite a bit down, unless the game's not quite as demanding as those system requirements seem to make it out. Maybe you've got like a 1660 Super or something. You're at 61% of the recommendation, but again, you can drop back to that minimum. And if we go up to the 1660 Super and we scroll up, you can find yourself, you're actually 3 times the minimum requirement. So at low settings, it sounds like you're gonna be fine. With 1080p or jumping up to 1440p, that kind of thing. So that's how you'd use this chart. Again, I'm not gonna read through everything. I can scroll through here a bit if you just wanna take a look at it on my screen, or you can find this in the description to my video. And again, I will now scroll through a bit more from the maximum page as I thank all of my subscribers and all of my channel members. You guys are even extra beautiful people clicking that join button and getting me financial support. And our latest one is Waffle B. Waffle B, welcome to the members. You have become one of the best people in the entire planet. Good job. I hope all of you have an excellent day.